Boom. Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Scatini, managing partner for Cognitive Harmony Technologies. This is our weekly free question and answer session. It's the 31st of August, and we're getting closer to rules and for applications and requests for applications to drop. Rules just came out last week, and so we are very lucky, very fortunate to have back with us Ellie Scheinman, who joins us every week and gives expert advice from Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. And we're really appreciative to have you back, Ellie. Hope your vacation went well and you got some rest.
A little bit, too much work, a lot of work emergencies, but a little rest, a little beach. It's good. Thank you.
Well, good. I mean, I know because it's urgent right now. I think that's the theme of our show. Is that we should be feeling a sense of urgency in the cannabis space today for licensure in the state of New Jersey, and I want to dig into that a little bit with you. We'll keep this quick and short because people's time is very valuable here. So let's start off with a little bit of talk about municipalities. You saw that the rules have come out, and municipalities had to come up to a decision on the 21st of August, and so many of them opted out of joining. Any thoughts on what that means for the New Jersey landscape?
I think a decent amount are going to come back in. It's candidly, it's hard keeping track of everything. Certain municipalities I'm following more than others, where I have clients who are in, so I've been tracking those. Some of them are just going to be out. That's kind of a fact, like in every other state, but there are a decent amount that indicated in their resolutions and meetings that they were temporarily opting out. They intended to come back in once they had a better understanding of the framework. And those can come in at any time. So we're kind of captive to the CRC and the overall timing of the process. If those municipalities come in too late, they might miss the boat. It typically takes about 60 days, on the municipal level, to introduce and then pass an ordinance at the second reading. So it's dicey on that timeline. But yeah, there'll be some activity for sure.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, we certainly see this as a major opportunity for municipalities and New Jersey itself to really redefine itself and to grasp a hold of this industry, because it's never going away. And I think to say no to it just as a knee-jerk reaction is probably a bad idea, but also to make a decision of what to do with the relegalization in your new community, it takes a lot. They have to come with a level of education. We certainly hope to provide that as well, and that we're happy to be a part of that conversation. Good.
I was going to ask. I mean, it's somewhat of a sidetrack, but I know you're in Missouri, obviously, work heavily there. Was there a municipal process there, or was it all state based? What was it like there?
It was all state. It was all state based. Everyone had the option to opt out. Every city and town, and in order to submit an application, you had to have the support of local municipalities. So it's the same process everywhere. I mean, no matter what your community has opted in or out right now, you should still be approaching them and figuring out, like, who's the person to talk to, who's really making that decision and why. If the answer was no, figure out why. Even if the answer is yes, figure out why they opted in and how they plan to utilize that to the betterment of the community.
So it's good advice for sure.
Yeah. So very, very exciting time. Obviously, they had to either opt in or out by the 21st of August. Since if they opted out, they can opt back in, is the rule. But if they hadn't opted out, I guess at that point they had to hold that for the next 5 years.
Yep.
Right? Hold that decision. So that, timelines, the time is passing quickly. Obviously, request for application will come out soon. How stressed out should someone who wants to pursue a license in New Jersey be right now?
Well, you got to manage the stress. Somewhat unknown. Again, we're captive to the CRC process here. if we're following the timeline, applications are supposed to be open very soon, within the next few weeks. That's the law. I do think we're going to see something fairly quickly. Depending on what you're trying to do, you may or may not have more time. What I'm personally advising my clients right now is to be ready to roll, within the next 2 weeks. Have everything at least that you're able to and you're able to control in order. That's property. Even if you're submitting for a conditional license application, which doesn't require you to have property up front, I would still recommend you trying to tie that up front, because that could take a long time. And if you get to phase 2 on the conditional, you don't want to be chasing around property during that entire period. Like, you want to have that up front, have all your corporate documents in a row, have your corporate structure in a row, have all that stuff ready to go. Your business plan, your management profile, whatever you can control. Now is the calm, before this happens. Do it, be ready. And if I'm wrong, if the CRC takes longer, you're in a good position. But our job, and at least my job as a lawyer, is to assume the worst case scenario. So I'm stressing out all my clients right now and telling them, be ready. You got a couple of weeks, let's go. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, there's no penalty for speeding your way ahead right now. I don't want folks to think that the pressure is off just because there is kind of that rolling window application discussion that that's take place with conditionals and all of that. Can you talk about the timeline for anyone submitting and what that means for social equity applicants who would move up to the front of the line, and what consideration should they be making there?
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand the process, at least based on what we've seen right now. Right. So, like, the best way I can interpret it is there's still going to be an application window like we've always had. I don't know what that window is going to look like. I see there's a question: how long do you expect the application window to stay open once they begin to accept them? Traditionally, it's been a 30 to 45 day process in New Jersey. It could be longer here. I wouldn't expect it to be 6 months. Maybe it's 3 months, but there's going to be, in my opinion, a finite beginning and a finite ending period of time. We know during that process, the applications are supposed to be, continually rolling, whatever that means. We know that during that process, there's not supposed to be any kind of cap on micro business licenses. Again, whatever that means, I don't know what that means. There will be limits, temporary limits on applications available, because the CRC is going to be reviewing that yearly. So I expect an application window, 30, maybe 90 days, where there's going to be X amount of licenses available. During that period of time, again, there's going to be no micro business caps. But again, it's hard for me to understand what that means in terms of the priority. We know 3 business classes are going to be prioritized over everything else. Those are social equity licenses. Those are impact zone licenses, applicants, and diversity owned business applicants. So those 3 are going to be prioritized over everything else, regardless of how you're submitting. Whether you're submitting on an annual basis, a conditional basis, a micro business basis, those 3 categories are always going to give you some kind of priority. Then we know conditional licenses are going to be prioritized, and then micro business licenses are going to be prioritized. We also know 35% are supposed to be allocated to conditional licenses in each class. We also know 10% are supposed to be allocated, at least 10%, towards micro business licenses. Hard to reconcile that with this concept of unlimited micro business licenses. So it's hard to figure out what the best approach is and what to do within each of these individual classes. So for instance, with the conditional license, that has the shortest turnaround time from the CRC perspective. They're supposed to provide you with an approval or denial within 30 days. Then you get into that secondary stage, the conditional phase, where you have 120 days to really submit the meat of your application. It's not an easy lift. It's not pro forma. Like, there's a lot of work to do there. And then you have to submit for a conversion to a full annual application. The regs are not clear on what the timeline is for the CRC to make the determination on the conversion process, right? So typically for an annual, it's a 90-day process. So if you add all of those pieces together, you're looking at an 8 to 10 month timeline. I don't know how to reconcile that with an open application window. What that means in terms of the priority, is the priority on the initial conditional submission? Is it on the conditional conversion to annual submission? I don't know. It's
No.
hard to understand. The CRC at the last meeting talked about putting things ahead on the pile. So what does that mean? If you have a prioritized annual application that's submitted on day one, but then you have a conditional application submitted 10 days later, what does that mean in terms of the pile? I don't know. So to simplify everything, again, what I'm telling my folks is that no matter what you're doing, try to be ready as close as possible on day one and submit. And if it's a conditional, don't take that 120 days. Be ready to submit the rest of your conditional, on day 31 when you get the approval back from the CRC. Just move quickly. That's the only advice I can give at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it always ends up being, a big pile up at the end, and, key important decisions get pushed off to the end. And, it's always a recipe for disaster in the application process for a cannabis license. So yeah, in terms of priority of things that folks should be looking at, I look at communication within that community where you want to impact, and developing those relationships and an understanding of kind of what you want to do with within that community and how you'll contribute back to it. Anything that you can think of on the legal side that you would consider a major priority? Is it a formation of the company, or what would you say?
I think timing wise, forming a company is quick. You can do that in a day. You can put together an operating agreement fairly quickly once you understand what you're going in for. Like, you need to understand if you're going in for a conditional, because that's going to restrict your ownership table. Same thing with a micro. So like, you need to understand that before you start making those, but you can always structure a company fairly quickly and put together your organizational documents. If you're going to be applying for a diversely owned business, if you're coming in as that kind of applicant, which is disabled veteran, female, minority, 51% ownership, and control, you need to have that certification from the state. And to get that certification, some of my clients have gotten that fairly quickly this round. I've seen 2 weeks to 3 weeks. But that's a tough turnaround time. And in order to get that certification, you need to form your company first and have those organizational documents to submit to the state. So to me, that's a priority, because you get points for that. So if you're coming in as a diversely owned business applicant, you need to do that soon.
Really great advice. Really great advice. Thank you. So we've got two questions in the chat bar really quickly. We're going to get to those. And I think that's probably about all we can do at this point. Let's see here. So John has asked us how long to expect the application window to stay open once they begin to accept them. I know it's probably, and it all depends, right?
Yep. We don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see what that window is. Not sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I know it's going to kind of be rolling. I think we're going to start working on some kind of like graphical timelines to put it within the accelerator here for people to track, when the windows are open and closing and how long it's supposed to be going for.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks, John. And then Ravi Shankar, let's see, are cannabis beverages not allowed in New Jersey? I don't know if are they able to through the manufacturing process? I think there has been discussion about preventing cannabis beverages.
Yeah, it's at least the way the regs read now, it's fairly limited. So it does not appear to be favorable towards beverages, and edibles, generally. The only thing really allowed, from an edible perspective, is they refer to as chewable forms, which could be gummies, I guess. We need some further clarification on that, but it's fairly limited. It does not appear to allow beverages at this point in time.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, not a slice of the market that I would put all of my eggs in that basket anyway, but okay, yeah, so that's good to know and understand. Do we have any other questions at this point in time, or anything you want to talk about or wanted to address, Ellie, before we got off?
No, I just wondering what what kind of stuff you're seeing on your end, or what you're hearing. what your folks have been interested, the clients that you're working with, and I don't know, anything interesting on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're certainly seeing a lot of difficulty in identifying and locking down property. We're, seeing some examples of traditional price gouging within the real estate market and things of that nature. But nothing remarkable. I think everyone's really waiting for the request for applications to come out. I think that's when it gets real very quickly once that hits.
Yeah.
So can you monitor me, because it says I'm having some internet difficulties?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So here we go. Can a cannabis dispensary collect customer information with the customer's knowledge? With the customer's knowledge, I think that answer would have to be yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously, dispensaries are able to collect information if they say it's going to be used for email listservs or even for research. I mean, there's a really huge opportunity for research within the rule set here as well. So I think that's pretty unique for the New Jersey market. Do you agree that dispensaries can collect information with the customer's knowledge?
I think the answer to that is yes. Typically, the standard protocol at this point is no, unless the customer consents, right? So you'll show your ID, you'll flash your ID when you come in, but they're not supposed to record anything or have any names unless, you're opting into a listserv, let's say some rewards program, or something like that, where you'll be able to do it. So I think that's correct. Yep.
Perfect. All right, and then any time limit for the towns to have to opt back in?
No.
Yeah, I think that's whenever they want.
If they want
can always
to.
opt back in. Yeah.
Right. They're going to have to move quickly. I mean, I think that's what you're going to see, for the reasons we talked about. Otherwise, they're just going to miss it. They're going to miss the boat completely.
Right. Yeah. You do not want to be the last one to this party here. And, I think being, what is this, the 18th or 17th state to legalize for adult use now, the sky hasn't fallen in those other 16 states. And I think hopefully New Jersey just really does see this as an opportunity to grasp the future and shape it, for the improvement of the Garden State. So look, it looks like our questions are wrapped up at this time, Ellie. I know that your time is super valuable and that you just got back. I really want to say thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Unless you have any closing comments.
No, I saw one post in the chat here. So one of the attendees has been contacted by a large company outside New Jersey, minority, very engaged in the state. What pitfalls should I look for in conversing with them about how I can be of assistance? So that's a great question.
Yeah,
and something
in that
we've all seen that, Todd, way too many times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll hand that one over to you first. I mean, you can talk about that.
Yeah. So one, you have to be very cautious. All right. I would warn everyone to be very cautious because, and I'm not saying that this company is sharking you or anything, Denise. But I am that the period or really predatory practices can take hold, where decisions made will have to be made under due arrest at some point. But I think the first thing you might want to do is secure an NDA, so that you can speak very frankly with this organization. But there's also great potential that they could bring something to the table for you, be it expertise or capital or whatever it may be. But I would if it doesn't feel right, I would say back away or get a second opinion. So, we've seen a lot of activity like that, across the country, through numerous application processes. And, I just want to make sure that that we have a lot of scar tissue on our side as well from activities like this, but we've grown better because of it. And we hope to be able to, provide experience, our experience for you, to help you avoid many of the pitfalls.
Yeah.
Ellie?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, we've all been scarred by that to some extent. I'd say that the good news this time around is the state has made it very difficult for out-of-state predatory companies to come in and really try to take advantage of people, just because of the way everything is set up, and all agreements are going to have to be disclosed. You can't create these management services agreement, which we've seen historically as ways for big companies to get around caps, like on ownership caps. You can only have X amount of licenses. So what they would do is or if there were residency requirements or local requirements requiring owners to have 51%, the big companies would come in under a management services agreement where they're effectively running everything day to day. And even though they don't have majority ownership, they're taking majority revenue split, and they're pretending it's not ownership where it's really ownership to get around these various factors. You're not going to be able to do that easily here at all. I think it's going to be very challenging to do that. So that's the good news. I think there's structural protections in place from the law and the regulations that will help you. But I agree with your comment, Todd. If it doesn't feel right, just walk away. You don't necessarily need it. And particularly if you're going in for a smaller, micro business type situation, obviously an out-of-state operator can't have ownership there. I guess theoretically they could have an MSA, management services agreement, but they shouldn't be asking for anything that's not reasonable from a market perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I always try to get behind the purpose of the conversation, and why they're in the industry and why they want to be in New Jersey. And with asking them a why question, you could learn a lot for sure. I'll move on to Haynes. Haynes Co. What are our thoughts about environmental impact plans for dispensaries, like single-use packaging? And aren't we at the mercy of the product manufacturers? I don't think we're at the mercy of the product manufacturers. And I do know that you get full points, right, by using sustainable packaging and things of that nature. But you're not necessarily at the mercy of the manufacturers. The manufacturers want you to buy their products, right? So telling them that you want sustainable packaging and ensuring and really kind of holding their feet to the fire, I think is the method to go about something like that. So you should be seeking to create relationships. If you're a dispensary, you should seek to create relationships with manufacturers and with cultivators, even during and through the licensing process, because those relationships will be key relationships where your businesses can kind of grow together. But if part of your company values that you're really trying to establish is that you are sustainable and have a very reduced impact on the environment, if that's your brand, which it should be, I encourage all of you that should be part of your brand. By the way, we have to, as a cannabis industry, try to be better in terms of packaging and our footprint on the ground. But that's kind of what I would say to that, Haynes. That's up to you and your manufacturer. And you should let them know that that's part of your demand signal, is that you're looking for packaging that's not going to be your children's problem or your children's problem.
Yep. It's good advice. Good advice.
Any thoughts on that, Ellie, in terms of legality?
No, I think your advice is right. All that stuff is going to help you thinking about sustainability and energy consumption, and also on the waste disposal side. I mean, think about that. We're not at the mercy of the manufacturers. We're all at the mercy of the cultivators. I mean, that's the reality, but that's a different issue.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this is a good question for you. How do you get into political advocacy? How does that piece work? I know political advocacy from the activist side, right? And for all the folks that want to be license holders, I would say if you haven't been an activist already in the cannabis space, become an activist now. You have to be your own activist in this industry. And the activist community is incredibly unique in cannabis, with amazing stories associated with them and that business. So being an activist is part of political advocacy, but Ellie, I know that there are other parts of it as well in terms of how you get representation into a community. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and that's what you touched on in the beginning. That local outreach. So you really have two options. One is to try and make a go of it yourself, which personally I'm in favor of. It should be a disciplined approach. You should understand what you're doing and probably, have a game plan, not probably have a game plan going in, speak to other people who have done it, understand what you're trying to do and the mission. But I personally encourage my clients to go in and speak to the community. Hiring a lobbyist, and my firm has a lobbying subsidiary, but I always tell my clients, at least first and foremost, try to do it yourself, because I think there's experience to be gained there. I'm not really worried about missteps, like unless you're offering a bribe to someone, and then we're having a completely different discussion at that point. You do benefit by showing your own face and not having that intermediary that's a legal rep or somebody else. So I personally am in favor of clients going in and doing that themselves. But every now and then you do need help, and people can open doors, and that's really the value of the lobbyists. They just have relationships, and sometimes they can help you get a meeting that you're just unable to get by yourself. And the person who's going to be entertaining you at that meeting will listen more if you have, this person at your side. So in sum, I'd say go in and do as much as you can yourself. And then, when you really need it, you can call in some help to smooth things. That's my thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point. And I mean, city council members, anyone within the government structure, within the local community, those are folks that you'll want to address. And most of them have, because they are elected by you, the citizen, they have open door policies or ways to contact them. And, my recommendation would be to come forth with kind of your, who you are, your business that you want to establish in that community, a little bit about your business plan and why giving you a cannabis license to operate in their community is beneficial. Like what your plans are. And, the big ask is, how do I get a letter of approval from you that says that I can operate a cannabis business in this town, right? Or in this municipality. So that's really the golden ticket. So those approval letters, like you have to ask them, what's the approval process for applying for a cannabis license in this town that
Right.
you pay taxes, perhaps?
They're going to be board resolutions too, for the most part. Like, I think actually you need it. So you're going to need a board resolution. So you're going to have to go before council at some point, whatever that process is going to be. But also, like, if these are places that you live in, that you work in, if you're networking with your neighbors, getting them on board, they can speak out on your behalf at these meetings too. I mean, that would show the town that, like, you're a solid applicant. You're not only trying to convince them, but you're showing them that the community is behind you. In the past, we used to worry about RICO claims from neighbors, neighbors who didn't want it, not in my backyard, that type of thing. These businesses, they would actually file lawsuits against the cannabis companies because they weren't doing that. They weren't showing the community what they're actually offering. So to the extent you live there, you work there, you have roots there, you can build that consensus as well, and that will support you for sure. Yep.
Awesome.
Side point on that, actually, I actually saw there's been an uptick in RICO lawsuits, but now what you're seeing is operators suing gray market operators on RICO type issues, which is a fascinating twist. So they're going after the unlicensed entities that are selling. I haven't seen it in New Jersey, but I've been seeing it nationally, which is interesting.
Well, I think it's nice. It's just a sign of the evolution of cannabis. With the re-legalization of the plant. Previously, all of these issues between someone who was producing, cultivating, distributing cannabis, issues would be dealt with in the streets and with violence oftentimes. And now they get to be dealt with in the court of law, and it's really enriching for me to be able to watch all of that. I'm sure it is for you as well, Ellie. With such a keen eye on law in general, you've been able to really watch the evolution, not just in the local community, but across the country now. So we always appreciate you.
Yeah, look, we've been doing it together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's really cool to watch that now. I think we're out of questions at this time. And, I think that's a good sign only because, people have been attending these regularly and, they've gotten so much information. I'm so glad that we're able to provide that. And we hope that folks will continue to follow us and join up and be involved in CHT and, let's be a part of the cannabis future together.
It's good, Todd.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Always a
Ellie, take
pleasure.
care.
You too.
Same. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Yep. Take care.
Oh, Linda. Linda is typing. Hold on. Thanks, Linda. Have a great night.